In this video, we'll be having a look at the cytoskeleton. Cytoskeleton is actually a very extensive network that we find within cells. And usually when you're looking at artists' images of cells in textbooks, it really is underrepresented because by the time we walk through this, you'll have an idea why. It's because it's so extensive that if an artist tried to show it in a picture, it would basically keep you from seeing everything else. Let's have a look. So what is the cytoskeleton? Well, the first thing we should know, it's dynamic. It changes its function. So it's not hardwired in. It's very flexible. It can be moved. It can be torn down, rebuilt according to what the cell needs at that moment. And it gives the cell its characteristic shape and size. And why? How does it do it? It creates an internal framework. So it provides not only strength, it provides structural integrity. It's also a place that you can anchor things. So anchoring sites support the plasma membrane, the nuclear membrane, and also organelles. It also allows for cellular movement where protein filaments can be associated with things called motor proteins. And motor proteins have the ability to move along with the cytoskeleton. So sometimes it takes on specific roles in specialized cells. So it could, in some cells, we have the process of phagocytosis by macrophages or contraction of muscle cells. Now let's have a look. What are the components of the cytoskeleton? Now there's different types of filaments, and we're going to have a look at them. There's actin, there's intermediate filaments, and there's microtubules. So these are three types of long protein filaments that are made of smaller protein subunits, and which means they can be built up and taken down quite quickly. They can be rearranged. So let's start by looking at actin, and we'll come back and see actin in some of its specialized roles, such as muscle contraction, in future chapters. So actin filaments, they're a microfilament. They're the thinnest. And they're actually composed of two strands of actin subunits. So let's just zoom in here. That each one of these is an actin subunit. Right? And then you notice that there's a sort of a string of these subunits that are put together. And then I have another string of actin subunits put together, and they intertwine with each other. So, as I said, these are all individual actin subunits. So what does it do? It provides structural support. It helps with tension and maintaining the cell shape. And it's involved with cellular motion, such as the motor protein myosin interacts with it. And we'll come back and really talk about that story of how myosin and actin interact in things like skeletal muscle in order to cause muscle contraction, and the role of other things like troponin, tropomyosin, and calcium. But that's for another chapter. Now, intermediate fibers, not surprisingly, they're sort of in between size. Rope-like. They're made of different fibers, proteins. And one example of this would be keratin. And of course, keratin you may have heard of because it's a very important protein that we find in hair, nails, and the very upper levels or most superficial levels of our skin. And these tend to be more permanent structures. And they really are forming the backbone of the framework of the cell. They anchor organelles in place. They help organelles and the nucleus maintain both its shape and size. And think about, let's consider keratin. Keratin's in your fingernails, it's in your hair, it's in the upper layer of your skin. This can be one tough filament. So it helps cells and tissues withstand mechanical stresses. And you can see it's built by these interlocking, interwoven filaments. And that adds a lot of strength. And there's a number of them that come together to form these intermediate filaments. So let's talk about another group, which are the microtubules. They're the largest, and if you notice that it's made of subunits, but the subunits spiral around, and as a result, we end up, and this is sort of looking at the end, you can see that we actually end up with a center. So it's almost like a tube-like structure. So these are hollow rods or tubes, and they're made of, and look at the name. The name's perfect. Tubulin. Isn't that great? Microtubules, what are they made of? Tubulin. Doesn't get much easier than that. Can be, and now these can be added very quickly. I can build these up, or I can take these away very quickly. Rapidly added, removed, allows for the size and the shape of a cell to change very quickly. It also has a big role in maintaining the internal architecture. It helps to keep organelles in their place. And we see things like dynein and kinesin, which are involved with the transport of vesicles along the microtubule network. If you do watch the video that's posted about the life inside a cell, that animation, you'll actually see all these structures. You'll see tubulin being made and disassembled. And you'll actually see some of these motor proteins that are almost look like little people. They almost look like that walk along these structures. So have a look at that video. It's posted, and it's a great video. Now, here's just to show you, how extensive it is. So if I take a cell and I stain it for actin filaments, you can see that there's a very extensive, it's the purple ones, a very extensive network of actin filaments within there. Now, if I stain just for the intermediate filaments, look at this. So add in the intermediate filaments, and you can see they're the green ones. It's almost like a spider web that completely occupies most of the inside of the cell. And the same thing with microtubules. So if I have all three of these layered within a cell, you can see how extensive this cytoskeleton is. And once again, in your book, it does a really good summary of the visuals, the structure, the location, by looking at the visuals, and the functions. So once again, make sure you get into your textbook, you read it. Your textbook really is the basis of your complete knowledge for this course. Okay, now there are some other filaments, and microtubules extend to something called a centrosome. And we'll have a look at that in this. When cells are not divided, because they have a big role in cell division, centrosomes act as what we call a microtubule organizing center, and they're close to the nucleus. And the centrioles come in pairs, and it's really a ring of 9 groups. Okay, this is going to get confusing in a second. There's 9 groups of 3 modified microtubules. Okay, so there's subunits of where 3 microtubules come together, and it forms this pair, this triplet of them. And then there's 9 of them that come together to form the final structure. We'll have a look at that. And the centrioles play a big role in cellular division, which we talk about down the road. We also have basilar bodies. They're modified microtubules on the internal surface of the plasma membrane, where the flagella and the cilia originate. So let's just have a quick look. So as I said, when we're looking at these we're looking at some centrioles here. You can see that, yes, there's 1, 2, 3. There's a triplet of these tubes. And you see here's another triplet of the tubes, another one. And it's organized that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So it's 9 groups, and each group is made of 3 of these tubules. And these are, you can see individual tubulin molecules there, and these are the microtubules that you can see. Okay, we're going to end the video there, and the next video we'll come back and talk about the cellular extensions.